Part 2, here we go.
What about having shows with people who have opposing views to you and you debate them? Kind of like Jesse Peterson when people bring in outrage, but maybe more intellectual. So I love debates. I really do enjoy debates. You know, when I was asked this a couple of months ago to hop onto Discord and do a debate with an animal rights advocate, I'm like, I'm there. I can't think of a debate request that's philosophical or economics or ethics that I have received that I have not jumped on.
All right, well, I'm just going to toss it out there. So if he ever comes across these few videos I make about him, I'm just extending the invitation. We can talk about anything he wants to. I'd prefer to talk about what's in this video. It could be primarily ethics regarding anarchism and the proper way to go about dealing with daddy government, especially the court system. But if you wanted to talk about something else, I'd be open to that. Now, the thing is, Stefan likes to deal with debates because that's what he's used to. But unfortunately, debates is what the government likes. And the reason for that is because it's so easy for slippery people to get away with slippery statements because they get their quote-unquote turn, meaning, just in case this is new to you, this is why the presidential debates are set up the way they are. You've got this person gets 2 minutes, this person gets 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. They just get a set amount of time to just go off. So they can say whatever they want. They can lay out 20 claims, and the chances that the person who responds, let's say it's 10 claims are true and 10 claims are BS, and the other person knows it and they can prove it, by the time they get around to their turn, unless they wrote down all 10 and then have time to address all 10, how are they going to do that? They're going to make counterclaims and present evidence. Then that person, the counter ends, and then the original claim maker begins, and he can pick and choose which ones he wants to respond to. Or he can just not do it at all and just go off. And of course, the whole point is to just be convincing to independent, free-thinking fence-sitters who are observing all of this, right? It's certainly not to change the other person's mind. I don't think I'm going to be able to change Stefan's mind about anything. Because imagine, he quote-unquote debates me and then changes his mind and flips again on something. It just would damage his credibility even further. There's no way he's going to do it. Forget what's right or wrong or provable or not. Well, so while I can play and beat him on that chessboard, it makes a whole lot more sense to do civil discourse in a more Socratic fashion, and I will give him the opportunity, whether he wants to start making claims or if he wants me to make claims and defend them. I don't care. But all I'm going to do is just let her rip, Stefan, let her rip. And if I hear you say something that I would like to challenge, I'll just say a quick objection, and that's not a rude interruption, that's just part of the rules. Quick objection, and then I'll ask my clarification of what you're saying. Okay? There's a couple of guidelines here. I don't want to call them hard and fast rules because we're both grown ups, so just some guidelines here. One issue on the table at a time that's in dispute. We may not move on to a secondary issue until the first one is resolved, or unless it directly results to the first. And we can either agree or agree to disagree, and then we move on to the next one. Okay? This is not how people are used to arguing for good reason. That's not the culture. The culture is crooked when it comes to communicating differences between people. Second guideline would be no just obvious interrupting. You just don't get to. Now, the quick objection is an interruption, obviously, but that's to further the conversation. That's not being rude. Because let's call out an interruption for exactly what it is. That is someone saying that what you have to say is so unimportant, and what I have to say is so much more important that I get to say it now. That's just rude. Just wait till the person's done. Now, if they say something that's obviously nonsense, like 2 + 2 is 5, and I go, quick objection, that's not an interruption. If the goal is to achieve truth, or to object to obvious nonsense, that's not an interruption. That's just a challenge and an objection, which is fine. That's called progress. But unlike, these Jerry Springer types, interrupt, like you see on presidential debates, that is not how adults communicate. That's how children communicate, okay? People who are correct don't need to silence the other party. They'll just go ahead. Oh, let her rip. Because they know that what's going to come out of that person's mouth is complete and total nonsense. And that way, it's easier if I don't have to make the claims that are true, if you get to make the ones that are false, and then I point out the truth. You're helping me. You're making it easier for me. If you're standing on truth and someone else is lying, you do not need to interrupt them. In fact, you don't even feel the need to. You're so secure and confident in what you're bringing to the table, you're more than happy to let them talk their nonsense. It's just going to give you more and more opportunities to expose their inconsistencies, both logic or ethics, or both, thereby letting anyone know this is not credible information. It's not personal. I'm not trying to call this guy any insult. I'm just saying what he believes about this particular topic is not credible and should not be followed. It's not any kind of reflection against his intelligence. Someone who's speaking the truth in the face of bullshit has no desire to commit logical fallacies of any kind, let alone ad hominem attacks. That's pointless. It's like pedaling backwards. Why would you do that? You don't do 2 steps forward, 1 back. If you want to move forward, you just keep walking forward. So if the opportunity ever presented itself, and I'm positive it won't, there's no way Stephen would watch these videos and then want to talk to me. This is not going to happen. He knows what would be being brought to the table. He knows he doesn't want to deal with that, especially someone like me who's good in front of, judges. If you can handle judge, you can handle anybody on the planet. So yeah, I would prefer to do the civil discourse, and I will give him his preference the entire time. If he wants to do all the claim making and I challenge him the entire time, that's fine. If he wants me to make all the claims and he challenged me all the time, that's fine. I don't have a preference one way or the other, because I'm going to win no matter what. And by win, I mean just expose through logic and reason and objective, non-controversial ethics, screw the word morality, that's subjective, that I'm consistent and he's not, that I'm in line with what makes common sense, rational thought, reasonable behavior, ethical, principled thinking. And he's falling short of that standard on whatever various topics he wants to go into. Now, there are topics, like I've mentioned, that we agree on. We don't have anything to discuss there because we agree. Oh, yay. But on the ones where it's up for dispute. So that's my kind of long-winded version about it. Let us let him finish here.
Of the last, I can't even remember how long, but basically, if you have a debate that's really philosophical, really about economics, or really about ethics, or reality, or the senses, or objectivity, or UPB, or whatever, I'm all over it.
Okay, well, I'm officially opening an invitation and requesting an audience of His Majesty, just for the record. I'll bring it to his table. Let's see if he stands up to, I'm all over it because he loves debates. I will debate again, lastly, but I don't want to. I want to have civil discourse and go back and forth like I've described. All right, that's it. Next video. All right, next video clip. 6 minutes, 47 seconds. This is classic Stefan Molyneux. I love this version. He is hating on statism, just pointing it out, using truth, logic, ethics to expose the hidden violence that is often covered up with flowery language. This is beautiful, man. I love this stuff. Let's do it.
That a statist, somebody who wants government-enforced laws, regulations, rules, and brutalities to run your life, wants you thrown in jail for disagreeing with him. He wants you thrown in jail for disagreeing with him. Let's say you're against the war on drugs, like any sane and moral human being is. Let's say you're against the war on drugs.
Trump's not.
And you make your case and you lay out your arguments and you talk about the non-aggression principle and self-ownership and responsibility and humanity. And your friend says, no, I still think that the war on drugs is good and I want to support it.
Like Trump does.
What he's really saying is, I want you thrown in jail for following your conscience, for doing what is right. I want men in blue costumes to come to your house, stick a gun in your face, and say, come into the windowless van with us for years. Even if you'd never touch an illegal drug. Because the war on drugs is all about funding. And if you find it objectionable that people get locked up in cages for carrying innocuous bits of vegetation, then you should be able to withdraw not just your moral, abstract, who gives a shit support, but your actual, tangible financial support to such a monstrous, monstrous attack upon humanity. So, if I'm against the war on drugs, what I want is to withdraw my funding for the war on drugs. To withdraw the money that is extracted from me at gunpoint and used to pay people to throw people in cages where they are brutalized and often raped for years. That is what it means to have a conscience, be able to act on it. To not be forced to support that which is evil.
Amen, brother.
Let's say that you're against the war, or the wars, or wars in general. What does it mean to be anti-war? Does it mean that you can go around the streets and wave your little placards? Does it mean you can write on your blog that war is double plus oogie? No. Being against the war means not being forced to fund a war, not being forced to pay for the murder of innocent foreigners.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That's what it means to be against the war. Are you against the horrors of the permanent underclass that has been created by government education and the welfare state? Does your conscience say that this is monstrous and evil, and it's the most destructive thing that has ever been foisted on the poor outside of the medieval goddamn plague? What does it mean to be against these predations?
Good question.
Does it mean that you can wave your placards and write your blog and say to people, well, I don't really think it's that good, and here are the facts behind it? No. It means nothing. That means nothing. If you're a cow in an electrified paddock and you want to spray paint on your side, I don't like me paddocks. Farmer doesn't care. Just stay in the goddamn fence and you can do whatever you want. The fence is your money. The fence is your obedience, which is enforced upon you, either directly with the gun to your head of taxation or indirectly with the silent pickpocket of fiat currency inflation and debt.
It's gold.
To follow your conscience, to do what is right, means that you have to oppose being forced to pay for that which is evil. That is what the government is doing, always. It is forcing people to pay for that which they object to. Because if they didn't object to it, it would be called charity, for Christ's sake. The government is all about forcing people to act against their conscience. The United Way is a charity. They do not force you to support them. The government forces people to support its activities because it is directly what they do not want to do. And generally, it is because they do not want to do it morally. The government is ethics rape in perpetuity.
Ethics rape in
So
perpetuity.
when your friends say to you, I want so-and-so to be in power, I want so-and-so to be in power, I'm in favor of the war, I'm in favor of the war to drugs, I'm in favor of government education, I'm in favor of welfare, social security, national debts, you name it.
Like Trump is?
What they are saying to you, to your face,
To you, Stefan.
is, if you follow your conscience, if you do what is right, I want you thrown in a cage for years for tax evasion. If you act upon your conscience and cease to support that which is morally repugnant to you and destructive to the lives, literally, of millions of people, if you act on that which is right, I want you kidnapped and thrown in jail for years.
That's what it is.
That is the ring of statists who are all around you.
You don't pay your property tax, they'll
And
steal
that's
it.
what they are saying to you. Follow your conscience, go to jail. And I like that. And I want that. And if you resist that, you are a bad person who must be double-thrown in jail. That is the matrix, the statrix, right? Do what is right, go to jail. That is what your friends, your family, your companions, your co-workers, that is what they want. That is what they want, even when you spell it out, even when you explain it, even when you show them the facts, even when you give them the basic arguments, even when you show them the gun in the room. They want you hauled away in a fucking burlap sack and thrown in a cage
As a message to the
for following
rest.
your conscience, for the mere act of disagreeing with them about the value and virtue of certain ways of doing things in society.
They'll make an example out of you. You've been naughty.
So you are ringed by weapons. And you are ringed by people whose words praise and arm and take the safety off those weapons. You are ringed by the snipers of statism and those who support you, being thrown in jail for following your conscience. That is the stakes that we're at. You're ringed by weapons. And you say to people, put down the weapons. Let's reason about this. Put down the weapons. Let's reason about how to solve problems in society, how to fix things, how to get things done, so that people don't get caged, so that the unborn don't get sold off and stolen from.
Can't reason with a parasite.
So that the solution to problems is not always more guns, more laws, more fucking cages. Let's just reason together and see if we can't find a way to have a society which is not murder-based, which is not cage-based, which is not violence-based.
You can't reason with a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Put down your weapons, everybody, and let's reason about this. That's all you're saying. That's all you're saying. If you're into freedom, if you're into liberty, if you're into compassion, if you're in human communication that does not involve...
Oh, the line's already been crossed. They've gone too far. There's no more
That
reason.
is who you are surrounded by.
You can't reason with these people.
Who like weapons rather than words.
I like weapons.
And who only use words to cover up the weapons. To put a velvet glove on the bottomless fist of the state.
Oh, it's beautiful. Brings a tear to my eye. I just want to point out again, I was hard on Molyneux my first video, but I want to balance it with the praise, because that is gold material right there. All right, next video. Okay, here's another pro Stefan clip. I'm not sure the exact date of this. This might only be a few years ago, but he's not talking about real issues that he's totally flipped on entirely anyway. So I thought it was a great little explanation of talking to other people about, having a minimum state versus no state, and it's a great argument for anarchy, just to show that, hey, the guy can give great interview clips.
Rome started as the smallest government at the time, with real focus on trade and infrastructure and minimal interference in trade. It grew to be a massive empire. If you look at England, when it started experimenting in free trade, what grew out of that was the British Empire. If you look at America, which is the experiment in the smallest conceivable government, what grows out of that is the largest government the world has ever seen. And my argument is, when you have a small government, you create free trade. You create the classic sort of von Misesian or Austrian economics argument, which is that if you don't interfere, you get massive efficiencies. You get the correct or rational allocation of resources through the price system without the interference of the swords of the state. So when you have a small government, you get a huge amount of free trade, you get a massive growth in wealth. And then the government goes, that's quite a lot of wealth. And so it starts to scoop and scoop and scoop. And taxes can go up. And it can also use the wealth that's being created and its tax powers as collateral for borrowing.
Right.
And then once the government can borrow, it can buy votes in the present by selling off future generations, which is kind of where we are now. So my argument would be, even if you do collapse the state to something very small, you then create this huge growth in wealth, which the government will then use to grow. And so I think my argument is, even if we did achieve what we wanted with a very small state, we'd just be resetting the clock back to 1776, and it would roll forward exactly the same way again. And the only way to break the cycle is not to lower the dimmer switch, but push it and turn off the light.
Well, that's about the most persuasive argument of anarchy that I've personally heard. So
really?
Congratulations on
that's
that.
Good.
It's hard for
Would
me.
you like another one? No, I'm kidding.
Us squishes, it's not so easy.
No, I would love it if politics worked, and if education worked, and I mean, wouldn't that be great? Because it's not. To talk to people about a small state is a hugely different conversation than to talk to people about no state. And so, it's sort of the difference between saying to someone, I think you should cut down on your food, or saying you shouldn't eat at all. That's how people sort of receive it. Say, well, yeah, okay, I should cut down on my donuts, whatever. No food at all? Are you crazy? And so, and particularly in libertarian objectivist circles, like the holy trinity of the small state, right? The police, the law courts, and the military. People will say, let's shrink it down to that. They can still conceive of how it would work. But when you start talking about, private dispute resolution agencies, private defense agencies, I mean, there's these short circuits that go off in people's heads, and suddenly the matrix just shimmers and they sort of, turn inside out, and it becomes a really challenging conversation. But I think that it's something that needs to be discussed, because it would be a real shame if we were chasing the government back down to something small that then becomes how stars, they collapse and then they go supernova. That to me is the real cycle. We crush the state back down again through incredible efforts of blood and propaganda and reasoning and argument and, fractured relationships and wars and all that. And then it just keeps blowing up again. So I'm just really interested, at least exploring on how we might be able to break that cycle.
Shimmering the Matrix here in Las Vegas with Stefan Molyneux. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I ain't got nothing there. Good little clip, right? Alright, so the last issue on this video is going to be his flip with atheism and Christianity. Before I show you the one where he's criticizing atheism and returning to Christianity, obviously I'm going to show you an earlier one, classic Molyneux, of him and his feelings on Christianity and support for atheism. Here we go.
With people who are irrational culty mystics, right, which is Christianity, right? Let's stop pretending that it's some sort of edifice of Western civilization. It's simply an extraordinarily successful cult. And we know what makes a cult extraordinarily successful is not an excess of rationality and logic and real kindness, not do-nicery. Do philosophers really say, philosophers who are interested in the moral instruction of mankind in a positive and pleasant way, we hope, do they really say, well, you have one of two choices. You can either pursue rationality and check your thoughts and values and opinions against reality and work for and only sort of enact and believe in moral principles that are universal and reversible and all these kinds of things. Or you can simply read a book that's a couple of thousand years old, with rape, incest, murder, torture, pedophilia, all of that advocated in it, and simply conform to whatever other people tell you, and never check any of your premises against reality, but be a blind conformist to irrational and brutal texts. Would that be a sane proposition to make in any way, shape, or form?
And then these same people who stand over children filling their heads with irrational filth, when they then meet an adult, competent, assertive philosopher, suddenly get all foggy and retreat into the comforting realms of metaphor and otherworldly agnosticism and other dimensions and so on, and you have to take the Bible in its cultural context, and right, this is what I find so vile about religious people.
So there are no nice Christians. There are no nice religious people. There are people who look nice because they do nice things, and they conform with people, and they fit nicely, and they dress well, and they drive cars, and they give to charity, and so on. These are not nice people. First and foremost, they have never examined their premises because they're afraid to, and they know that they're false. That's the hostility you get from Christians when you begin to question the premises, is because they know that what they're talking about is completely false. So intellectual cowards of the first order, slavishly conformist people. Slavishly conformist people. Christians cannot think for themselves in any fundamental philosophical sense, in any way, shape, or form. Completely and totally conformist. And if you believe that that's a virtue, then great. Then I'm evil. People who are nice and who wish to mold the minds of innocent children with destructive lies are not really very nice.
So, pretty obvious that he held quite disdain for not only Christianity, but just religious people. You can't really be that way unless you're pretty atheist-leaning. And to be atheist, there's, I guess, two different kinds. One is there absolutely is no God, and the other one's kind of what I do, which is I see no factual evidence whatsoever for the existence of God, and so it's highly unlikely that there is one, and I just leave it at that. I'm not exactly sure what brand he was, but it sounded pretty hardcore, right? So if you were to go on Google, and there's a ton of videos out there about not only Stefan flip-flopping on this issue, but obviously more recently his just blatant support, not just support of Christianity, but he actually takes it a step further and seriously criticizes atheism, which I just find unnecessary. I mean, why inflame the flip-flop fire if he's obviously, well, if he's trying to gain more popularity by appealing to Republicans through Trump and Christianity, there's really no need to bash atheism. But here's the flip-flop. Here we go.
So this is a challenging topic, to put it mildly. Issues that I have with atheists and with atheism. Now, I was raised as a good Christian boy. I was in the church choir, went religiously, you could say, and for various reasons I've talked about it in my show, it's changed. But I have found myself growing increasingly impatient with atheists. Hey, it could just be because I'm cranky and old, but...
So he used to be one, and now that type of person is intolerant, and now he's just kind of gotten soft with the Christianity. I mean, just compare that to the videos you just saw.
I think there's also some good reasons for it, which I'll share with you, and then you can tell me what you think in the comments below, and I look forward to your feedback. So one thing I can't help but notice is that if you are an atheist, overwhelmingly, you are for big government.
How on God's green earth can you connect those dots? And just because I'm an exception to that rule, I'm obviously for no government and I'm an atheist, doesn't mean I'm only coming from that perspective. I know many, many atheists. All right? I've talked to dozens and dozens throughout my life. I mean, they're more common than religious people. I don't care what the stats say. When you talk especially about what people actually truly to the core believe, they will act out. So if you look at their actions, how hardcore are they going to church? Do they believe it? Do they do what they, all the rules say to do and fellowship and all this stuff? No. Atheists make up the vast majority of the population in America. Even if people claim they're Christian, it's rare that they're actually being a Christian or actually fully buy into it. If you really thought the difference between you going to heaven and hell were real, they'd be acting in very extreme ways to guarantee they'd be going into heaven. And furthermore, they'd be going to extreme measures to protect their family and friends. I mean, hardcore, annoyingly hardcore, right? So I'm just going off of people's actions.
You are a leftist. You are on the liberal side.
Again, so not only are you for big government, but you're a leftist and you're on the liberal side as a Democrat. How do you connect those dots? He's going to give a stat here, and I'll go from there.
Almost 70% of atheists in the U.S. identify as Democrats.
According to what survey? And you got to understand, all survey results, well, if it's not just information that people are forced to give. But voluntary survey takers, like someone who would say, oh yeah, I'm atheist and I'm liberal and this, that, and the other, they have to be people who are willing to take a survey. What percentage of atheists are willing to take a survey for free out of their time? Very, very, very few. And those who are usually the much older generation, and it's not because they want to take the survey so much, it's because they're very lonely and they like to talk to people who seem genuinely interested in their answers. Straight up. It's unfortunately, I've heard stories.
In that direction. Majority call themselves political liberals, and 1 in 10 atheists say that they are conservatives. Now,
so he's tossing out 70% are liberal and 1% are conservatives. An atheist with half his brain will tell you that religion is just another state. It's just another authority that wants you to do what it wants you to do for its benefit. Screw what's best for you in your life. To the point of lifelong fraud, and even spiritual fraud. I mean, the Dalai Lama, for whatever you take him for, said that spiritual violence is the worst kind of all violences. And that's the Dalai Lama. Consider the violence that was inflicted upon him. If you don't know, I read one book. It's His Good Life. Anyway, he's just categorically making this claim, and he's going to run with it the whole video. Is that the actions of a philosopher? Is that the actions of someone with logic? Or are those the actions of someone who's just, using a huge logical fallacy and a statistic to back it up? That obviously, who knows what percentage of atheists even answer that survey. Right off the bat, I was just astounded. A hardcore philosopher looking into a camera, knowing he has to face himself in the mirror, saying these things on the internet that last forever.
Conservatism has its pluses and its minuses. One of the pluses is that it's for smaller government. Almost 3/4 of atheists say that coercive government redistribution of money to the poor in the form of welfare does much more good than harm.
Atheists think that coercive government in the form of welfare does more good than harm? Tell me this is another April Fool's, right, Stef?
And that is a challenging statement. In 2012, Barack Obama captured 3/4 of the votes among the religiously unaffiliated, and only 23% voted for John McCain.
Religiously unaffiliated does not equal atheist.
So, here's the thing. If I live next door to a Christian, that Christian can go to church and can worship and can do whatever they like, and they're not compelling me to do anything. They have their beliefs, I have my beliefs. We shake hands, we exchange cups of sugar.
But quite often, there's a combination of church and state. If not just openly, then just indirectly. There are parts of America where there is no difference between church and state. I went to a government council meeting in Fort Worth, Texas, within the last year or so. There's no separation of church and state. You have to be Christian. They have a Christian say the prayer, everybody bows their heads and says this Christian prayer. All right, everybody's just in church on Sunday, and there's a gazillion Christian private universities to go to. Every person in power is a Christian, and they believe that the apocalypse is coming. Like, that's not someone you want with your finger anywhere near any kind of button that has power over you in your life. Why would an atheist dislike religion but love the state? They're one and the same.
Cake emergencies, but they do not force me to do anything. On the other hand, the lefties, by constantly running to Big Daddy government to enforce their moral conscience on everyone else, regardless of consequences.
Totally irrelevant. Atheists do not run to Big Daddy government.
Regardless of ethics, regardless of voluntarism, regardless of the need to choose, that is essential to virtue. The socialists, by running to Big Daddy government, well, they force me to do lots and lots of things.
So your argument is Christians don't force you to do anything when Christians are in power, and they very much wield the force in majority areas of the South and Utah. Okay, I grew up in Utah. There's no separation of church and state there when I was growing up. It's gotten better. But still, go look at the religious affiliation of all the people in power. So Christians don't force me to do anything, but atheists through the government do? This isn't just pointing out how silly he is for being a flip-flopping hypocrite and an obvious liar. It's exposing his complete and utter lack of any kind of intellectual integrity in the slightest in this video. What happened to your mind, Stefan? Is money or fame really so important that you're willing to pay this price?
They take my money. They bury me in regulations. They involve my cash. In foreign wars, they do lots of god-awful things. And if I try to follow...
Atheists through the government are responsible for war. I gotcha. Makes perfect sense.
...my own conscience and do what I think is best with my resources, well, they support cats in blue showing up with guns to drag me off to jail because I'm not paying my taxes.
So you're blaming atheists for all the evils of the state. You're connecting these dots. Is this really the best you've got? I mean, really, what else could he say? What do atheists do that's so horrible? Oh, he's Hitler and Mao, they were atheists. Shut up. We don't know that. Just because they weren't religiously affiliated means they were the hardcore atheists and they were doing it because there is no God and I can do whatever I want. As if people can't come up with morals and ethics in a community of cooperation, which is how we evolved to get this far, without an imaginary humanoid in the sky, right? That's the best he can come up with. I mean, for a reason. Because you can't come up with any kind of reason that accurately reflects where atheists, as a generalization, cause harm to other human beings. Guess who makes up the vast majority of PhDs and the scientific community? People who analyze factual evidence and empirical evidence for a living and have great depths of education to do so. They're atheists. Doesn't mean I'm positive there's not a God. It's just, hey, I don't see any evidence for it whatsoever. Seems like the miracle faucet ran dry once people could really record whether that stuff did or did not happen, especially in modern times. Anyway, I won't even begin to go off on the mountain of evidence against the existence of a God, but whatever.
So, lefties support things like property tax, and property tax means you never really own anything in your house.
That's atheist fault.
Certainly
too.
don't own your house or your condo or whatever.
Atheists did
because
it.
if you don't pay off the government, they can just come and take it from you. So all you're doing is renting from the government. You never own anything. And Christians have a thou shalt not steal, which gives them some ammunition.
How many Christians are in the government in positions of power? What do you call George Bush Jr.? Seriously? Obama had a church in Chicago, Christian. Are you smoking, like, what kind of meth are you on? Really?
Against increasing state power. So I can't sort of help but notice that the Christians will try to convert me by the word and not the sword of the state.
The word that you yourself previously condemned for all of the horrendous forms of torture and inflicted suffering upon innocent people. It's now good enough that, hey, Christians just use this word to try and convert me. You condemned it as that they're bad people, they brainwash their children. I mean, how much more of a flip-flop can someone make? And it's just especially astounding because it's apparently in the logic and ethics game.
Whereas the liberals, the lefties, the Democrats, well, they want to use the sword of the state to make me follow their moral agenda. And let's just say sword a tad more intrusive than word.
Atheist
and
fault.
That is something that I can't help but notice. Atheism in and of itself, okay, well, that's, good cases to be made, and it's an intellectual argument that I've made before.
It's not an intellectual argument you made before. You were ranting and raving. You were as extreme as it gets while not resorting to violence. You were insulting. You were disrespectful. You were condemning in the strongest sense of any words you could muster. That's not, oh, I've made an argument for it before. You're minimizing your hypocrisy. You're so obvious a hack.
But here's the problem. Atheists say that they reject irrational authority. They reject unjust and immoral authority.
Fair enough.
Very well. How about, and just try this, if you know an atheist or know somebody who's agnostic or whatever, bring to them the basic argument that the government is the initiation of force, that taxation is coercion.
Well, obviously this isn't going to work on me. obviously, because I'm not into the government, and most clear thinking, the vast majority of atheists, which, oh, by the way, again, like I mentioned, tend to be the higher IQ side of the human spectrum, are not in favor of government. Who is actually in favor of government? Unless you have a direct job where you work for the government, like cops, lawyers, judges, military, politicians, court support personnel, just administration. Who else? Teachers work for public, I guess. Firemen. I mean, the list goes on. Other than people who get their paycheck directly from the state, who among the atheists likes the government? They force you with the taxes and they commit horrible crimes of nonviolent victimless criminal charges, and they go to war. What? It's horribly corrupt. This is bought and paid for. The lobbyists, the for-profit prisons. How much? Who likes the government? If a person is rational enough to escape the cult of religious authority, but they're too much of a dick to not want to wield government state violence when it suits them. I mean, I'm only going to let a little bit more of this video go on because he's already said enough. My point is made and he's made his too, and it's just... See what I mean when this is like a child talking? I can't even be mad at this guy because it's so retarded. It's so retarded.
And see how they respond. Do they respond with, wow, never really thought of it that way before? Tell me more. Or do they respond as religious fundamentalists respond when you challenge their faith? I will tell you, it is almost invariably the latter. And I've had many, many conversations with atheists about this particular issue, that the government is an agency of force, and that which you ask the government to do, you are begging for the initiation of force to be deployed in a geographical area against the specifically
It applies the same to everybody you could bring that conversation to, okay? An atheist who's not working for the state, but he's just kind of apolitical, is far more likely to be swayed by, hey, maybe we shouldn't be threatening people with guns or nonviolent victims, criminal charges, like drug wars, prostitution, and stuff like that. Way more like, hey, you want to lower my taxes and not go into foreign wars and be trying to be the police of the world? Way more likely to be swayed in that direction than he is to rigidly say, oh no, we got to have the full measure of the government.
Willing to coerce them to act against their own conscience. And that basic reality is that it sort of helped me to understand that for the most part, atheism is an outgrowth of faith in the modern God called the state.
Oh, God. Oh, I'm going to end it there. Oh, thanks for the laugh, you fucking retard. So after that laugh, I wanted to add one more real short video at the end of this video. It's less than 3 minutes long, and it's of somebody who commented or wrote Stefan and pulled no punches, just straight up told him in a professional way why he unsubscribed to him, why he's not interested in hearing anything he has to say anymore. Just exactly why, you'll see. And the thing that I want to point at and draw out of this is Stefan's psychological approach, the way he absorbs and digests this. And it's just the ego's out of control, and it just shows, like, I've commented him, I've made 2 comments that he responded to, and they were both along the same lines. They weren't as harsh as this criticism, but I was just letting him know this is what's up with this part. And it was the same thing. It's denial, and usually ends in that's not an argument.
Okay, so here's a thing here. This is a bit long, but let me know what you think. It's a little harsh, but doesn't mean it's false. He says, I was one of the regular listeners, and I had to stop watching eventually, like many others. This is something to be a little bit cautious about when somebody says, nobody cares what you have to think. We don't care what you have to think. We don't, like, when somebody starts to bring the Aragorn-style ghost army behind them to make a point,
It's not an Aragon ghost army. He's talking about the fact that he's had several conversations with multiple people on forums and in comments section that mirror the same feeling. And there's a reason for it. And the reason why you're not doing anything to fix it is because you don't recognize it, or you do and you're not willing to fix it. He's not making a logical fallacy here. I myself personally too, hordes of time have I been in this chat and that chat, and all of a sudden something will break out and they'll start criticizing Molyneux. And it's usually poking fun at him and throwing up memes. Okay, Steph?
Usually not very valid. But anyway, okay. You may not like what I'm about to say, Stefan, but it's the truth. I had to stop watching because of you. In terms...
You don't need to read the letter with this inflection of anger. You could just read it very calmly. Do you need to add an angry emotion to him to kind of discredit where he's coming from? Or not. I could be wrong.
Of your arguments and takes, they were pretty unassailable, but it was your ego that let you down. I put up with it for a while because the content was good, but eventually it got in the way so much that I had to stop watching you.
By the way, I could have written this. I feel exactly the way this guy does.
You were always finding an opportunity to heap praise on yourself, to big yourself up. Aside from this, you spoke with such an odious air of pompousness and seemed to have a relentlessly ruthless opinion on the faults of others. You would also often break out in these extremely verbose and flowery monologues with all the accompanying amateur dramatics that were, quite honestly, insufferable to sit through. You came across as a narcissistic, clownishly pompous, and cold-hearted dick, to be frank. I have a master's in history, don't you know, pleb? I'm an actor who went to acting school, charlatan. Did I tell you guys about how fantastic a businessman I am?
He does this all the time. I mean, I haven't watched most of his material. He's been out a long time, right? But, you know, I had a job where I could listen to stuff. And so that's the only reason why I would listen to stuff every now and then, because I was working, right? Might as well. But, yeah, he does this all the damn time. He has no humility. What he says is like, oh, I'm positive.
Worked in IT, simpleton. How many times did you inject phrases like that into your videos, Stefan? Because I lost count. As time went on, your shows became more about exalting you and you alone, how clever you were, how fantastic your analogies were, as you often would tell us, how qualified you were, how unequivocally right you were, and what a great and perfect specimen of an Übermensch you were. All this while maintaining a scathing and merciless position on people who fell short of your vision for humanity that ultimately made you look devoid of humanity.
That's a bit flowery. I wouldn't go that far, or I would make it more simple, but anyway, same point.
People, I don't want to be party to that sort of obnoxious self-regard, self-praise, egocentricity, and stampeding narcissism. Just to hear a few good thoughts here and there. Stefan, it speaks to a huge deficit in character and personal development. Who wants to seriously follow the ethical, moral advice of someone who has such faults in their character? If you want to restore viewership, you don't need any shiny new gizmos or tactics. You simply need humility and mercy. That's it. A bit of humility and mercy, Stefan. Two great virtues of the Christian faith that never fail to make a person more likable and, as a result, more watchable. I guess this is a Christian. To be honest, it seems a little bit judgy when it comes to, you know, heaping up the enormity of my, stampeding narcissism and pompous self-regard and all that.
So instead of replying to the criticism and maybe even offering possible solutions or reasoning as to why it's not true or all true, he resorts to calling the other person a hypocrite. I mean, this guy could have really gone off and started dropping F-bombs and everything. He used strong language, but it's because he feels, it seems, very disappointed. Very, like, I'm done. The value per minute ratio is too low. You're wasting my time, therefore I'm going to go to someone else. And his first knee-jerk response is to blame the other person and not to look at it critically. Psychologically, that is very telling.
So I'm not sure it's the best Christian perspective to be that kind of judgy and hostile. So, yeah, I mean, if it's relevant, if somebody says, here's how to run a business, I'll say, well, I actually have run a business, and if you haven't, it doesn't mean I'm right, it just means that,
See, and then his next thing is to say, there's nothing wrong with me bringing up the fact that I have this special thing that not many people do. I've heard it countless times, I brought up this business, and then I sold it, and I got into acting school, and they took 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 100 applicants. No proof whatsoever. I studied, I know how to do films. I'm a philosopher, I'm logical and ethical, and you should listen to me. I know how to give relationship advice, even though I'm not trained in relationship advice or psychology. Right? So that's his second tactic, is to do exactly what the letter complained about. is to justify, I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this. You don't have to bring that up as often as you do. Here and there, and especially the context he just used, okay, I don't have a problem with it, but he obviously does it enough for a lot of people to think that he does it way too much, and he will not face that.
If somebody says, well, you don't have any credentials, I say, well, I have a master's. I got an A in historical analysis of 4 major philosophers of the Western tradition, so...
See, not only does he do it again, but he builds it up and builds it up and builds it up to as flowery and impressive as it can be. He could just say, I have a master's in history. He doesn't recognize, or maybe he does and he's just in flat denial, that what he's doing really rubs people the wrong way. And then he goes on videos and complains that his donations are falling, that his numbers, his subscribers are falling, and it's all because he's a victim of psychological warfare inflicted by YouTube. This guy claims to be this philosophy whiz with the biggest philosophy channel on the internet, and he can't even be self-aware enough to recognize these very basic flaws in his in self-analysis. I know he gets this similar complaints. He probably gets the same half dozen complaints over and over and over and over and over. And bragging is definitely one of them. And here he's just dismissing it. Number 1 and 2 right off the bat are not looking at himself.
So, let me guys, you guys let me know what you think. Have I become a rampaging, stampeding narcissist who obnoxious self-regard, self-praise, egocentricity, and all that? Let me know if in some way that I'm not aware of and that other listeners have not pointed out and my family has not noticed and so on.
That I'm not aware of, because I'm so smart and I would recognize it, that others have not told me about, because obviously if I was, I would have heard it from other people than just you, and that my family hasn't told me about. Your family who, for many reasons, wouldn't. A, they like you. They don't see it. They don't listen to your material. B, they know it but don't want to tell you. They don't want to hurt your feelings. They know their credibility is tied up in you. You're their husband and father. So, I'm going to insinuate that what you're saying is just out there in left field by yourself. Because, hey, somebody tell me, others haven't told me, my family hasn't told me, I don't see it myself, so yeah, let me know. He hears this complaint all the time, like he's lying through his teeth. And when I say that, I know because it's the comments. The guy looks at his comments and responds to his comments. If you get his video right away and start commenting right away, he sits there for like 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever, and he'll respond to you, even if it's criticism. So go into the comments and you'll see the similar themes in the critiques of what he's doing. Because people, it's the internet, man. It's brutal. They'll just call you out for your nonsense in the comments section. Everybody's anonymous. So you see it. And this is the end of the video. It's just dismiss, dismiss, dismiss. Ignore, ignore, ignore. This is the new and improved, brain-damaged, chemo-fogged, all due respect, Stefan Molyneux. He is not philosophy. People should not follow him, listen to him, take his advice seriously, or anything else. I listen to him mostly because it's unintentional comedy, and to me that's some of the best kind. Right? He says some funny things about race and IQ and about female nature, and sometimes he gets some wacky phone calls. And I'd come across his stuff once a week. That's all right for that. But as far as like making life decisions, he's a hypocrite and a liar. What other conclusions can be drawn?
Not an argument!